And that is really where the marketing mix modeling is being that sober guidance on your shoulder and giving you the number to discuss with the chief financial officer. That is the person that you need to talk to, right? The CFO needs to see the numbers. The CFO in D2C retail world is not a person who don't believe in brand, because then they would leave that whole business, right? But if they don't see any proof of, your marketing spend actually providing any value, they're just going to say, cut it.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy and leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. Another important topic today, we are talking about adding intelligence into your marketing mix, balancing the sales today view with future growth and profit. And really happy to have somebody who's got true expertise in this topic matter. I'll let him do his founder story in a minute. But warm welcome to Henrik, who's the founder of DEMA, a commerce intelligence platform. How are you doing, Henrik?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing fine. Sun is shining in Stockholm today.
Nice. Thank you for joining us from sunny Sweden. And for those listening who haven't come across DEMA before or not quite sure where it fits into the e-com tech stack, I'll let Henrik explain his background and what the platform does in a minute. But the context of what we're talking about today is, I think a lot of brands can resonate with this. There is constant trade impression, especially the last couple of years. It's quite intense. We've got all these macroeconomic factors causing loads and loads of turbulence. There's cost squeezes going on left, right, and centre. There's massive pressure to deliver on sales, and that brings a sales today mentality. I was speaking to a few of my clients recently who are really frustrated of how they're stuck in a discounting cycle where they're constantly going after the bottom of the funnel, but it's compromising their kind of other programs like their loyalty strategies. And it's also making them worry about brand positioning and brand growth and how do they distinguish from a D2C point of view if they're constant discounting whilst all their retail channels are, etc. And then how do you balance the need to deliver numbers with that more long-term piece? So we're going to come on to that. And that's why I want to talk about it, because the big concept today is around marketing mix modeling and what role and value that plays and how you can really approach that to balance those two and start deliver results through intelligent data. So that's my kind of waffly introduction. Let's go to you, because I think your founder story is really interesting. Do you want to give our listeners a flavor for who you are and how you got to launch in DEMA?
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Happy to do that, and thanks for the intro. So yeah, my name is Henrik Hovfman-Kraft, 36-year-old from a small town outside of Stockholm. My parents were both entrepreneurs, mom and pop type of companies. Always been in that mindset of kind of being the business, and that is really following all the way to where I am today, and kind of what we do at DEMA, to be frank. I studied business, and after a while, I landed in the e-commerce group. We had like 16 stores as well, but we saw ourselves as an e-commerce group. We were around 60 million euro in revenue when I joined. We were like 120 million euro in revenue when I left. I joined as a management trainee, worked side by side with one of the co-founders of that group, that is now my co-founder today, Marcus. I did everything. We moved warehouse from like a manually pick and pack to super automated, the best in breed type of thing. We did all kind of nice projects back then, like acquiring companies, etc., etc. Then I started really being part of the scaling journey of the Baby Shop group as heading the retention, and I ended up doing a lot of general growth initiatives in the group as well. But then I left after a while, went to the dark side of being an agent, as a consultant at the marketing agency company. But I struggled so much of being like, outside of my clients' businesses, not having any data at all that was actually driving their long-term growth, sustainable growth, like building that healthy business. I was just one of those ROAS hunters, to be frank. I asked for more data. Like I wanted the inventory data. I wanted the customer data. I wanted the fulfillment cost, the COGS, the full, contribution margin, metrics, etc., to really align not only with my counterpart, let's say the head of ecom, but actually the full company. So not only did we, of course, then deliver ROAS, but that was like almost toxic revenue. Like we weren't aligned and we got kicked out, like all agencies like do, right? And I found that so frustrating. And then I met up with Marcus and David, my current co-founders of DEMA, and they both also left Baby Shop Group, and we did like 2-3 years apart. And we met up and we were like, do you guys see what I see? And we were like, in different words, explaining the same thing. Because what we did at Baby Shop Group the last years before we left was actually building a really solid data warehouse, like great ETL, like structure. We were profit bidding on like contribution margin and profit LTV. Like we were really advanced in the end. So we just like, okay, guys, we need to build something here. It's obviously a need for this in the market to build something that it's never plug and play, but kind of plug and play, full solution for steering towards sustainable, profitable growth, where you align, as you were talking about, James, like both aligning today's sales target with the contribution or whatever bottom line targets together with the inventory and the customer acquisition. And the inventory connection is really so important because then you can optimize for the full season targets. Because if you just sell out today the best sellers, like you're just gonna suffer a week from now or 2 weeks from now, right? But that is really like that is really like why we started DEMA and my background.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely see us where, because global supply chains are still challenging, and people can have short-term stockouts that were unpredicted, and that happens very, very quickly, and not having the intelligence behind it to be able to marry the planned stock versus the actual available with the sales velocity to know that, do you know what, this PO's not landing, you're going to sell out 3 weeks quicker than you expected. It's really challenging. So I'd love to, let's answer that one first, because I think that's a really interesting standpoint. Then we'll get into the MMM stuff. So let's talk about how do you marry that up? Because a lot of the business I work with, they reach a point of, I think, data fatigue, where it's either they don't have the expertise to do it themselves, but they know what they want to achieve, and the resource isn't there, or they're not working with the right tools, and therefore it's, we can't do that, so we'll carry on. So how do you tie that up and make it work accurately?
Yeah, so like I'm not the data engineer here, but we had 20 of them. Almost no retailers have that. It's so much down to the nitty-gritty details of the data models to have everything really connected when it comes to the inventory, each product, each variant, each size, but also connecting that. And that is where I see, from an operator perspective, the most low-hanging fruits with all D2C brands jumping on the DEMA platform, really seeing their inventory. And we have not only your current inventory, but we also predict your inventory. So really like marrying that with your marketing spend on each product per day and really see what's going on there. Because it's not only, although we're going to focus on that now, the stockouts and everything, but it's not only the risk of stockouts, it's also your brand perception, right? And to not go into all the details of how, let's call them feed-based ads format, the shopping ads, Performance Max, the catalog ads, etc., right? But how they work is you ask them for a great ROAS, they will optimize for a great ROAS, right? They will sell more and more of what is working. They will move more and more spend to what is working for each day that specific product is working, right? It's not uncommon to see 80+% of the spend being down to like 20, not percent, sometimes 20 products. And the extreme products, like the top 5 of the products, are having an insane part of that spend, and that can go fast, and you need to be fast there. So although I believe that Meta and Google's algorithms are one of the best in the world, they're just gonna like work towards the goal you tell them to work, right? And the problem is that you can all of a sudden have, let's say that you're a clothing brand, right? But you have some accessories, and I've seen this firsthand 10+ times, and how we can really like during onboarding, we're like, oh, Jesus, course correct here, fast. But like a clothing brand, all of a sudden, sometimes they, for whatever reason, have like nice socks in a market that might not be their like first market, right? So you have a head office, they're not like more than human beings, right? All of a sudden, like that third, fourth, fifth market spends 80% of your marketing spend the last days on socks. That is the brand perception of your brand in that market. It's not only going to drive great ROAS, horrible contribution margin, because those socks cannot defend the fulfillment cost, right? And the shipping to that market. But it's also, all of a sudden, you're a sock brand. And this happens all the time. And then you sell out of those socks that were supposed to be amazing. I don't know how you say it in English, but the extra, thing you put in the basket when you've already picked the sweater, right? That type of product, So like you're out of that extra contribution margin possibility or potential with the socks, but you're also a sock brand in that market right now. So it's like, what we do then is really like, we let you automate it, of course, but we also let you see it in front of your eyes, connected, put it in a graph if you're a graph person, put it on the table if you're a table person, but like spend, sales, contribution margin, LTV, contribution, new customer per product, per day, per ad, what have you, right? That is really like where you need to get to do this in an efficient way 2025, because it's so fast now.
And for you, because there'll be people that listen who are using multi-mix models and they understand it, but maybe they've got challenges around how they optimize and improve it. And others who don't actually really know what it is and what the goals are. So you've talked about one element of it, which is about like brand protection. And that makes a lot of sense about how your brand is perceived based on the ads and the products that people are seeing, and for people who aren't used to you, knowing what you do sell and don't sell. What else commercially, when you're working with retailers, what are the fundamental goals and drivers of using MMM?
you want to know what actually works. Period. An MMM is not biased towards the clicks. It's not going to be like, it's privacy safe. Like, we don't care about you, James, if you clicked an ad, if you saw the ad. Like, actually, we don't care about you. Although we're customer centric, but in that marketing spend, like, we're not going to be like over obsessing with that buyer journey. We're just going to measure in an MMM investments in different buckets. And I say buckets and not channels because of a reason. Buckets of ads, campaigns, what have you. It could be a channel that we a bit wrongly called out of home, and we just put everything in that bucket. But it could also be top of funnel campaign in Meta, or retargeting in Meta, or performance max, very like free performance max in Google Ads. Like, it could be so many different buckets. What you measure in an MMM is investments in these buckets, in pounds, euros, dollars, whatever. And then you see fluctuations in those investments, and you measure the output of sales. That is typical MMM, or actually kind of like, that is top line MMM. The thing that we do that is extremely important for e-commerce, and I argue for brick and mortar retailers as well, is that we actually have the time variance effect. It becomes a bit technical here, but like the seasonality in there as well. We have spend on a daily basis here, and we see your seasonality and measure it over time. And that means that in part of the season, top of funnel initiatives might give you more, even right away, kind of. And part of the season, it might be better to capture the demand in a Google, let's say, white sweater. Like, that might be more bang for the buck in one part of the season, but not in the other part of the season. And MMM is also measuring the ad stock effect. That's a term worth Googling, so you can read it in proper English and not have my broken Swedish English. But like, the ad stock effect is the effect that the money you spend today actually have for the sales in a week or 2 or 3 or whatever, right? And typically, bottom funnel investments have a very, very short ad stock effect. And the further up you go, it's going to be longer and longer. Let's say a top of funnel awareness campaign in Meta has significant, for some brands, in some markets, because it's always different, right? And for some parts of the season, that awareness campaign can have like a 10-week ad stock effect. And that is something that you need to measure, and you get that like in a good MMM, like, for example, DEMA has.
That's really interesting, because as I said to you before we did this recording, it's not my expertise. I don't do digital marketing day in, day out. But I guess that's a real good benefit that I hadn't thought about, is being able to future project and really help to measure the impact of upper funnel when people really struggle in sales-based, numbers-based cycles, of being able to hive out small budgets initially to demonstrate the impact to the sales rate later on, specifically from those campaigns. That is really, really interesting, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, to be frank, everyone who has been in any type of, it's called marketing, but it's so much more sales, to be frank, when you're like working e-commerce, performance marketing, right? So anyone who's been in these kind of roles have been wanting to spend upper funnel, but have no signals and can never show that is actually giving effect. So whenever sales goes down, And the reporting up to management is not, so to speak, like welcomed with 2 thumbs up, meaning like sales is down, marketing spend is flat, meaning your cost of sales is horrible. If you hopefully measure contribution margin, maybe that is also horrible. Like you need to do something, you need to cut spend. It's not wrong to cut spend, but where you're gonna cut spend is where you can't show numbers to support that spend. That it will always be top of funnel versus bottom funnel, everything else equal, right? And MMM protects you from that. And that is so important because what you said in the intro for this episode, which I really emphasize with, or not, maybe the wrong English word there, but I really feel empathy for the teams that are pushed so hard to meet sales targets, and they're pushed down bottom funnel. The thing that they might need the most for the sales right now this week might be to stay, maybe not top of funnel, think out of home, sure. And you can't really make those decisions on a daily basis. But the more higher up meta ads, TikTok ads, Google, let's say YouTube, like whatever, that might drive better sales this week than the very bottom funnel things. Although the very bottom funnel things will always show a better ROAS, so you keep them because you fear of missing out. And that is really where the marketing mix modeling is being that sober guidance on your shoulder and telling you what everyone understands and giving you the number to discuss with, not the CMO, the chief financial officer. That is the person that you need to talk to, right? The CFO needs to see the numbers. The CFO in D2C retail world is not a person who don't believe in brand, because then they would leave that whole business, right? But if they don't see any proof of, your marketing spend actually providing any value to you, like they're just gonna say cut it.
Yeah, I think it's the challenge that ecom teams have is that they want to be able to demonstrate the impact of short-termism. But if you only look at it from a ROAS point of view, short-termism pays because it's delivering sales and it's highly measurable. And it's like, great, we increased sales by 15,000 last week, and okay, it was only a 2-to-1 ROAS, but still it made profit because of our margins. Great, finance team happy. But then if you flip the long-term view and look at like the retention piece, the lifetime value and the like margin over time of those customers, and are able to demonstrate that short-term promotional activity might be good in initial sales. So if you've got a discrepancy, you've got to pick up, great. However, a sustained focus on that actually compromises long-term margin. That's the evidence that ecom teams need to be able to fight their corner and be able to get those buckets of investment in like the upper to mid-funnel piece.
Yep. And I think that one of the big problem here is really the whole siloed, not only because that's kind of like what we're solving and why we are around, not only the data silos, but the org silos here. The ecom team fighting for, like if it should, like you're right, but it shouldn't be the ecom needs to fight for their right to spend and their share of budget or whatever. Like it might sound silly, but like you should be one team, right? You should be one business. You need to fight together for what's best for the company, and then you need to have all your data connected. And that is, and I hear myself pitching what we have too much, but you could, in theory at least, try. You could build it yourself. But I mean, you really need to connect online and offline, meaning like the stores as well, right? So the MMM needs to be omni-channel, of course. The MMM can't only look at the top line. Let's say you discount too heavily. Like the MMM should reflect that and say that you're actually not bringing contribution dollars to the brand right now, because you really have I see it as, and I don't know how that translates to English, but you have two gas pedals as an e-com team. You have the marketing spend and the discount. And you need to find the balance. And sometimes it's not necessarily binary, meaning you can't do discounts and that will just ruin the whole brand. But it most likely, and that effect is extremely hard to measure and be certain about, but it will take down the willingness of paying full price, right? But we can just philosophically think about that, but it cannot come to the cost of, you discount and you push marketing spend, meaning you will have a great ROAS, but an absolutely terrible contribution margin because, the basket can't protect the fulfillment cost, right? So that needs to be on the fingertips, like here, or how do you say it? Like easy to get for e-com teams and the CFO or the whole financial controlling team, merchandisers, etc. They need also to have this data, right? From their point of view.
Yeah, and the delayed stock impact, I like that idea of, because if you can model, and it's never 100% accurate because things change over time and they're changed by market and by what's happening with a competitor, etc. But if you know that a particular channel, whether it's Meta or Google, of upper funnel, like brand marketing, has a 10-week impact cycle, the ability to plan in that marketing around your promotional cycles where, a budget has said, right, in April, we need 30% year-on-year growth. Well, actually, we've got to have those upper funnel campaigns specific to those products or promotions live minus 10 weeks. The ability to improve your content and promotion calendar off the back of that and then keep tweaking it is really powerful.
Yeah. And another one that I sat working on a lot at Baby Shop when we scaled that business, we had, I keep forgetting, I'm not good at remembering exact numbers, but was it 4 or 5 web shops, and we were shipping to 80 countries on like a significant volume. I mean, you can just imagine the mess, right? But when we were planning for, let's say, Q4, I knew that from a new customer perspective, I need X number of new customers, right? That are willing to buy again. Let's, for lack of other words, let's say having a good predicted LTV, right? Just that before that specific period that you were talking about as well, right?
Yeah.
And connect that to products. I see that as a really low-hanging fruit for anyone that are able to connect their data internally, like understand, if not a daily basis, weekly basis at least, early on in the season, what products in what markets drive new customers that are profitable. So as you say now, James, like if I want growth late season, it could be worth pushing a certain group of products harder in some markets, because in these markets, these products give me a lot of profitable customers, right? And that profitable customer are more likely to come again and buy again later in the season, or like what have you, right? There are so many metrics for all these kinds of things, but in more of a conceptual way. So there's so many things that I'm like, and maybe you can hear me being frustrated, but I'm honestly frustrated that so many of my like favorite brands out there, when I talk to them, like it's a privileged position I have. Like I can personally reach out to my privately favorite brands and be like, hey, you should have my tool. But then I talk to them, I'm like, oh God, I wish you so much better in terms of like data. Like you should have this data. Like I love the brand, but you don't have this data. And that is also why I see you discounting too heavily now when we're entering July, right?
Yeah, a lot of the brands I work with, one of the biggest gaps they have in data is and I know Paul posted something on LinkedIn this week about the disconnect and the inaccuracy in analytics data. So where people don't have large teams who've got the ability to set up proper data warehouses, and they're pulling all the data through and doing all of the data storage manipulation and views there, where people are relying on GA, and people have moved from the old UA to GA4, there are still so many partial implementations where either the data views aren't as they need, therefore they don't have the event data to trigger the analysis, or the data accuracy is not correct because they haven't set up like the GTM correctly, and the tags aren't firing correctly, and the duplication and issues with how the platforms are firing tags. And you have a lot of what is your advice? Because you could have a really cool brand come to you and say, Taylor, Henrik, amazing, but our data's screwed. Like, how do you advise people? Because you can't fix underlying broken data. The data's got to be clean to help inform models.
You're absolutely right there. And given everything going on in privacy land, and I feel like the regulation is just one part of it, and then you have like the big Apple, being so aggressive on, and I personally, I have no problem with being not tracked that much, to be frank. But it's so many data points you can't trust out there, because all of a sudden Apple puts in something new in their iPhones, and then they triangulate out Meta and Google even more. Like, there's so much data in the visits and everything that is not in Meta or in, so to speak, in Google, like the ad platform data, that you can't really trust, because then you land on the website and UTMs are taken away, or you have cookie consent deny all, or you're like, ad blockers is not a problem these days. It's Apple, like, and so on. So like, I've never trusted those metrics less. But also, I've never seen a better reason to look at them less, because you have so much possibility in looking at metrics that can't be wrong, that actually should steer you. Like, MMM is one way of looking at it, but think of it: investment in initiatives and output. The output is an order. It's a new customer, or it's a returning customer. It's a returning customer for the fourth time. It's a profitable customer for the fourth time. It's a product sold to a country where it's constantly delivering a negative contribution margin. Like, there's so much in the data that is not failing. And yes, I advise every brand out there having huge GA4 issues to have something like of a fix, sure, like fix whatever, but then year over year data, like you cannot follow that, right? You cannot be like, oh, now we've fixed it, and then start reporting up, I don't know, engaged sessions or what have you, right? Or users on the website, and then you look at year over year data, and you're like, what? You just fixed something, and that's going to change everything. So you can't look at every year data, right? So there's so much reasons in start looking at what really drives sustainable growth in your business and what really matters, because a visit is just a vanity metric. It's the number of sweaters that are out there used by our customers, and the ability that we drive back customers. Everything else, like, you could just like take away. So in one way, like, an MMM for a company that doesn't have an MMM is, of course, to like look at your income statement, to be frank, and correlate that, and be like, follow the different spend patterns, and really see it, model it in one way or another down to your like income statement, to be frank.
Yeah, the whole vanity sanity metric debate. I mean, there's things like conversion rate. drives me nuts because conversion rate is a completely useless metric with no context around it and other metrics to understand the levers. I want to talk to you about incrementality testing. It's a hot topic. People use it all the time, but equally, and I know there'll be people listening who will have been jaded by this, there are too many what I would call suspect case studies in the market saying you doing this triples your revenue, conversion, whatever, where actually it isn't proven incrementality. There's probably a lot of substitutional sales. What is your approach? How do you genuinely measure incrementality in marketing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's an important topic, and like incrementality testing, it's often called geolift testing in the ad platforms. There are other type of incrementality testings going on, right? But how we work with it, which I think is obviously I think is the best way, is that incrementality test is, let's use a term that everyone remembers from being in the industry 10 plus years, an A/B test. I think people can grasp it a little bit better when you talk about an A/B test. And it's more of a scientific A/B test at scale in an ad platform. But you run an A/B test, you get causality. That is very important. You get causality in this in this test. How we do it, we feed the MMM. The MMM is talking to the attribution model. That is how I see it, how you should work with it. But incrementality tests is so easy to do these days, and everyone should do it. What you should test is top of funnel effect, because it's not taking into account the attribution, right? But you should also look at the bottom funnel things and do incrementality tests there. Easiest, most low-hanging fruit, branded search. The branded search campaign. Does it add any value at all? Any value whatsoever? Most likely limited value. But the problem with the incrementality tests are mainly two things as far as we look at it. One, you do it first in Meta and then you do it in Google. Let's make it simple and take out all the other ad platforms. And it's really putting Google versus Meta. And worst case, you have one internally working with Google ads and then you have one with Meta ads. So then it becomes a fight internally. And it's like, I should prove you this, I should prove you that. The problem is if you do it in platform incrementality tests, you don't have a unified way, like a measurement framework for this, meaning it's actually comparing apple to pear. What we do is, very shortly, like we make it apple to apple. So we look at all your data, all the orders, all the ad spend, and we can actually, from a more unbiased way, we can say that this is the test, this is the way you should test. And if you want to test your performance marketing, performance max campaign, or your top of funnel in Meta, like this is how you can test it, and you can actually compare apple to apple. I think that is extremely important. But then another thing that is important to know, like it's not that you should not do it, but when you do it in platform, you don't know maybe the two most important parts of the incrementality. And that is the new customer acquisition, because Meta and Google, they cannot know if it's a new customer or not. We do, for example, we have all your orders, right? So we can actually model that in. So you have your kind of like incremental CAC, right? And you can look at also the contribution. And we're so obsessed with that because it's very often that if you have incremental ROAS, you might go after the most low margin customers, good at finding discounts or what have you, right? It's not the ROAS you want. So you want that incremental, like sustainable ROAS, the profit ROAS, so to speak, right? Yeah, so it's really about, like, again, and that is our whole belief. Like, you cannot isolate being in one data silo. I think that incrementality is really to tell you, like, building trust in the media mix, right? But it's something that you should run. And if you can only run it in ad platforms, the incrementality test there, do it by all means. But what you need is really like the same measurement framework for all ad platforms. And I think that incrementality, what it can actually serve you as an head of ecom, head of marketing, whatever, is also a way of trusting the media mix that you have, right?
Yeah.
But it's a little bit too inefficient to run all the time to steer the media mix, right? So you need then like an MMM to not fall back in that full, like, oh, I'm fully dependent on attribution, like cookie-based attribution, right? So
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually, because if you go back maybe 3 years, everyone was still very, very much obsessed about attribution models. And now I've not heard people talk about attribution models, how to do it, what's the right one to use, and for quite a while. Whereas incrementality, and actually what people want to know is, what is the impact of my action, and is that impact reliable? So is that impact consistent? Therefore, I can model off it, or is it an outlier where it happened, but we don't really know why, and therefore I can't with confidence repeat that. And that's, to me, why incrementality testing is more powerful. Because it enables you to isolate specific elements and do that. And I'm not surprised that this is A, where the technology is headed, but B, especially with all of the data blocking issues out there, but B, where ecom teams are focused.
yeah, but the important part where incrementality tests fall short is the whole, you need something always running, always giving you feedback. Like, you can't have this holdout group where you have 40% less spend or no spend at all the entire season. And then all of a sudden you have the seasonality changes, right? I think that you should have more or less like an always on testing agenda in general, whatever company you are. Like, you should always be experimenting and testing. But that incrementality tests can't go on forever, all markets, all the time, all channels, right? So it's going to serve you with a guiding light, but then all of a sudden you have discounts, you have weather. Like, in some countries, right, they differ a lot, and the seasons and what have you, right? So
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's important, and nothing's perfect, is it? Look, I've got one. We had loads of potential questions before we start this, but I've really enjoyed that the conversation has been really quite open and intriguing listening to you, and I know listeners will get a lot of value. I've got one more key question I do want to get through, though, which is that one of the key things in DEMA is that you calculate the money brands are left on the table. Now, where people are wanting to see tools evolve is the automation around the intelligence and surfacing intelligence, rather than expecting you to be the proactive one in finding it. So I'd love you to talk people through, like, what signals are you using to help identify where there could be an issue, as in you missed out selling X, or you could have got better margin of Y. Could you talk people through a couple of examples maybe of how you're doing that?
Yeah. No, but it's again, like, when you have all data connected, you're not forced to be a victim of averages all the time, right? So this sweater is not the same in all my markets, right? You leave money on the table if you push this sweater the same way in all markets, meaning, the contribution margin on this sweater is X. So I should treat it equally in UK, Sweden, Germany, and US. No, that's not the case, right? So then you need to automate all these things. So what we do is we speak to not technically, but like conceptually, like we speak to the feed, whatever like feed ads you have out there, right? So you can make this automated into and treat it differently depending on the market. And it's leaving money on the table today versus in the future. You were very like much talking about the future before and stuff and so you were saying that either we get sales now or we get a better brand or whatever in the future, right? I'm oversimplifying, but what you actually can do is understanding that some products today are better sold in one market versus the other, right? And that is also like if you connect that to your potential stockouts coming up. So this is let's call it a bestseller. We predict that this is going to be sold out. I think you mentioned like 3 weeks from now. Okay, so in 3 weeks now, if we continue as we do, this one is going to be sold out. And let's say that is going to be mid-season. Like that is not good. We want a very balanced inventory throughout the season, especially the keep the best sellers and maximize them over the season, right? Because that is going to drive more efficient sales on the free and organic traffic, etc., right? So what you should do with this sweater might not be to cut all marketing spend, because it's kind of like wasted marketing spend because it's going to sell out anyway. What you might want to do is, and you can automate all this, right? You want to cut it in the countries where it brings least new amount of new customers, worse margin, or where that market is less dependent on this sweater for the total sales, kind of. Like it could be so many of those things, and it's money left on the table. In like the long tail is so long, right? There's so much money in the long tail that no one gets to when they have data in silos and not able to like automate those things. But that's also like where the MMM comes in, really. Left money on the table is where you overspend or underspend in a bucket of ads, right? Where you can, when you can efficiently scale that bucket and you don't, you leave money on the table.
Yeah.
You don't scale it right now because your attribution model is not letting you to. Let's say it doesn't look that efficient now for XYZ reason in GA4, etc., right? But an MMM could tell you with the ad stock effect and everything, like this is extremely good. You should spend more here. And that is also why we believe that an MMM should not be on top line. It should be on the contribution line, because then for all the MMM people out there that see saturation curves in their head when I say it, like a saturation curve with contribution margin is actually going down to zero again, meaning there's an equilibrium of exactly how much you should spend to optimize for a max for like maximizing contribution margin per channel or bucket of categories. So that is actually always helping you to know where you're overspending and underspending, and you don't need to think about like when should I stop spending, because that is very difficult to understand in a typical MMM.
Interesting. I could carry on going, like all these episodes, I could carry on going for ages, but I will stop there. Also want to leave the door open for people listening who might want to speak to you more about DEMA, the platform, and how it can solve some of their challenges. So if someone listening either wants to challenge you on something, push you further on how it really works, or even look at the platform, how do they reach out?
So yeah, my name is Henrik Hovfman-Kraft. I think I'm the only one with that name on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a perfect place. Also, if you want to discuss stuff, I love discussions on LinkedIn. Obviously, you're more than welcome to email me as well. That's henrik@dema.ai, DEMA.ai.
Amazing. Look, Henrik, always love chatting to you. Find it fascinating. Really enjoy seeing the success story of DEMA. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciated this discussion.
Cool. And thanks as always, everyone, for listening. Any questions, do reach out. Do contact Henrik if you want to learn more. And hopefully catch you next week.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gurd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.